I'm Ellis Martin. In this segment of the Ellis Martin Report, I speak with Dr. Paul Wessels, the President and CEO of Western Copper and Gold Corporation, trading on the New York Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange as WRN. Western Copper and Gold Corporation is developing the Casino Project, Canada's premier copper gold mine in the Yukon Territory, and one of the most economic greenfield copper gold mining projects in the world. The Casino Project hosts approximately 7.6 billion pounds of copper, as well as 14.5 million ounces of gold, one of the largest projects of its kind, again held by a junior mining company in the world. Paul, welcome back to the program. It's been a while. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Alice, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
What do you think about the market right now? I ask everybody this, but I'd be curious to see what your actual perception of it is. Where are we with copper and gold at the exact same time? It's my contention that they'll move together.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was about to say, I don't know if they'll move together, but I think they might move together for different reasons. It's just more of a happenstance. You've probably been asking people that, and it's been, well, you know, we must be close to the bottom. I feel like actually this is the week things turn. We started to see our share price begin to tick up. You saw gold prices go from low 1800s, and it was like, oh my God, is it going to go below 1800? And now we're comfortably above 1900. I haven't looked at it today, but yesterday it was sort of 1940. Copper, all the same things move copper. News out of China, news about electrification. There's some good news out of China. There's still headwinds in China with the housing market, but GDP growth keeps moving forward. Imports still look very, very high for China, and that's beginning to sort of weigh in on the copper price in a positive way. And you're seeing copper price move with that. And our share price, which has been beaten up like everybody else this week, actually sort of is ticking up a little bit. So yeah, I'm hoping that this isn't what they call the infamous dead cat bounce, that this is a positive sign of things to come. And this is the time of the year when this happens, right? I mean, things always get beaten up in October, and it's the end of October, beginning of November when you begin to see a bit of a rebound. And then, so this is what I think we're seeing now.
So what we're seeing is, in your words, a typical rebound. You're up about 3% today. And today, by the way, is October 18th, 2023. And this day, otherwise, is a terrible market. The Nasdaq's down, Dow Jones is down significantly, but we're seeing an uptick specifically with Western Copper and Gold.
I mean, I haven't looked at the gold equities, but things aren't moving and shooting up yet, but they're sort of a little unsettled that things are up and things are down. But that's usually the mark of some big move to come one way or another. And I'm going to suggest that it's up. I mean, obviously gold is up in terms of the commodity for, geopolitical reasons. And it always starts with gold. For whatever reason, mining stock, and we've got a lot of gold, as you know, 21 million ounces of gold in our deposit. So we move a bit with the gold stocks as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say you do have a huge amount of gold in the ground over there in the Yukon. And I've been out there, and by God, the whole landscape glistens with gold. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean. And Rio Tinto is on site. They're checking everything out every day they're there, I think. Is that right?
When the first drilling program we did in 2021, they were there for about a week this year. They had their geologists at site because it was a pretty small exploration program that we did this year. Mitsubishi was there pretty much the whole time, though. They actually had quite a few. They had about 4 of their geologists up there. Rio sent their geologists up for a week in September. So it's great. I mean, let's be honest, having Rio Tinto and Mitsubishi and that sort of horsepower on the geology side, on the metallurgy side, on the project execution side, I mean, they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes on the technical front that, I mean, I'm going to be blunt, I don't have to pay for, and the shareholders of the company get to benefit from.
Well, certainly nobody else is telling me that story right now. And I talked to many companies. I'm certainly not disparaging any of the other sponsors on this program at all. I'm just saying that you're an example of how it should go ultimately for every company in the business. And I understand, I heard it through the grapevine, that you had some meetings with Mitsubishi and Rio Tinto in London just recently. This month.
I was there for LME Week, and LME Week happens every year in October, and it's interesting to be there. I went for the first time last year and met with Mitsubishi in Rio, and I went this year and met with Mitsubishi in Rio, and everybody's in town. It's mostly about trading, though. So, I mean, it's not like I wander around and recognize a lot of people, which is usually the case for a mining sort of event, but it's more people on the concentrate trading and bullion trading, et cetera, et cetera. It is a time when everyone is in town, and so people, they come to town, and most importantly, it's senior people. So, we did have a chance to meet with senior people in Mitsubishi and then the senior group at Rio. And, very positive conversations, certainly strong commitment to the project moving forward.
Can you give me any specifics about what you were talking about? No? Okay. I'm a shareholder. I have a right to know. So what's the plan going forward for the next year? What else do you have to do to show Mitsubishi and Rio Tinto that you're available?
The focus that we have as a company, specifically on the casino project, we're also always looking at other assets and other opportunities, but specifically on advancing the project, which, again, we now have a joint technical and sustainability committee, which both Rio and Mitsubishi sit on. That's a very active committee. I mean, now we're meeting on a monthly basis, if not sometimes every couple of weeks. Obviously, permitting and moving the permitting forward is a key part. Lots of work on power. I mean, we probably talked about this the last time we got together. I mean, it's a really exciting development. It's a real game changer in terms of this project, is the idea of getting grid power onto the project. And so the idea here is to connect the Yukon grid to the British Columbia grid. And that would thereby connect us to, essentially the entire west coast of North America in terms of power. And that brings in cheaper power. It brings in green power. We're now talking very green copper out of this. This is increasingly important to everyone, I'll be honest, and ourselves, Rio, Mitsubishi, shareholders. It actually is a great win-win-win situation here because, the Yukon is running out of power. They're looking for enough justification to push this grid connect. And, our project, along with, some of the other projects earlier stage, along with the needs right now of the Yukon, which is running out of power, it all comes together quite nicely. So that's going to be a big push here next year as well.
There will be a resolution.
The Yukon government is all in. They're absolutely committed to this. The feds and British Columbia, those conversations have been had and they're in. The First Nations, I think, that's the stage where things are at right now. I mean, the governments are talking to the First Nations and making sure they understand the plan in terms of moving this forward. Hopefully we get to something concrete and announceable on this, and is really what I'm pushing for, because right now it's just conversations and, like I said, just getting everyone aligned. But then the next stage is that this all becomes public and we start to do studies and we start to do alignments and putting things together like that. So, I talked to the BC government yesterday. I'm going to Ottawa in 3 weeks. It's exciting. It's a game changer. It is going to require these three levels of government all to come together.
And you were lobbying on all those levels, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. And, actually, I mean, one thing I can share, one of the things that we did talk about when we were talking to Rio is like, hey, love to have your much larger team putting their shoulder behind that. And they said, absolutely. That was a big positive as well.
So they wouldn't necessarily jump in unless you ask them to do it?
You got to ask, right? So,
well, good on you. Good on you. So is that power from BC? Is that all hydro? How's that generated?
Yeah, British Columbia is, I don't know if it's 100%, but it's like 99.5% hydro. It's pretty much all hydro. I was going to say, I think there's a little bit of solar somewhere and maybe there's a bit of wind. Actually, no. Think of all the travels I've done around British Columbia. There's a bit of wind, but most of it's hydropower.
So it's 100% green in your opinion?
It's 100% green, yeah.
That is fantastic. I think the only other part of North America that may be like that is Quebec, right?
Yeah, and for much the same reasons. They've just got this great hydro potential that they've tapped again and again. So, and it's sort of interesting, talking to the Rio guys. So Rio has an aluminum smelter in British Columbia. And associated with that aluminum smelter is their own hydroelectric dam. So, I mean, if you connected the grids, Rio remains involved. I could be buying power for the casino project from Rio Tinto.
I don't even know how to wrap my head around that, except for it's most likely good for shareholders. Did I hear you earlier in this interview say that you were looking at acquisitions? Did you say that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for opportunities. We've got a new board. We've got a couple of board members that are real M&A guys from a way back. And so they're always looking for opportunities. And like right now, there's some interesting opportunities out there. Everybody's beaten up. And I feel like we're a little less beaten up than some other people. And we've looked at probably a dozen opportunities this year. I mean, obviously I haven't pulled the trigger on any of them. Part of the reason there is that we've got a big program here on moving the permitting forward, but there's some interesting exploration opportunities that we could add in as one avenue that we're looking at. We're looking at a couple of different avenues.
In the Yukon or anywhere in North America?
Good opportunities are good opportunities. We're trying not to limit ourselves too much. But
Paul, I know that copper has been designated, at least in Canada, as a critical mineral. How has that changed you you and let's say your marketing strategy, your pitch when you're speaking to investors around the world, what does that mean for the company?
Copper also recently was added to the list in the United States as well. That's for another call why I think that copper is actually probably the most important critical mineral out there. I mean, it doesn't have that fancy name. Everybody knows what copper is. It's not like halftonium or something like that, but it is probably the one that has most people worried. But it's moving at the federal government level and in both Canada and the US. We're actually going to be this week on a forum in New York City. There's just a small list and this is being run by Natural Resources Canada. We're going to be down in New York specifically to reach out to investors and to specific entities within the United States with a number of other sort of critical minerals projects in Canada. So it's becoming a big part of the dialogue in both in Canada and the US. I mean, you see it again and again in the news. And right now with the copper and actually the molybdenum that we have in the deposit, we're actually the largest critical minerals project in Canada. And that gets attention in Canada, gets attention in the US, certainly helps move everything forward.
I think that's a catchphrase. I think that's a slug line for this particular interview, the largest critical minerals asset in Canada.
If you look at our new corporate presentation, it's right on the cover. So yeah, it's an important part of key things that we're going to need here to address the electrification and the energy transition as we move forward. And so
well, Paul, thank you so much for the conversation today. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to an update in the very near future. Let's not let it be too long.
All right. Sounds good. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Ellis, and I look forward to our next conversation.
I've been speaking with Dr. Paul Wessels, the president and CEO of Western Copper and Gold Corporation, trading on the New York Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange as WRN. Go to the company's website, westerncoppercorp.com. I'm Ellis Martin, and I'm an investor with Western Copper and Gold Corporation.